Ricky, your style of play stole our hearts too. Hey everyone, Will O'Toole welcoming you to the first edition of the 2025 Park Ridge Sports History episodes. And I'd like to actually wish you all a happy new year, much success, and great health in the new year. And I'd like to focus on some of the things that actually transpired after we kind of went into hibernation for the last 4 weeks. It was kind of crazy with Christmas and Hanukkah and the New Year's celebrations and all the rest of it. So we took a little bit of a respite, and now we are back, and I'm happy to be here. Kudos to Howard on another successful season with Park Ridge Sports History in 2024. We're going to do the same thing in 2025 and beyond that. But I'd like to focus some attention on the recent passing of Ricky Henderson, kind of a surprise, and just look at where he is kind of situated in the all-time greats. Now, just judging by WAR, and we're just going to use WAR as it is a highly controversial statistic. Many people still don't know what it is, myself included, or I understand, let's say, the guts of it and what it's supposed to measure, not just the overt statistics, home runs, RBIs, batting average, but also the intangibles that a player brings to the game. And that's why Henderson, I think, is an interesting study because according to WAR, he does rank in the top 20. In fact, I'm just going to just run off the top players all time, just as players, not the pitchers, on the list of WAR, and see where you think your players. It's kind of surprising with it. I'll start with Henderson. He's number 19. He's got 111.1 WAR. Lou Gehrig is number 18 at 113.7, followed by, he is pushed aside by Alex Rodriguez, who actually played 22 years in the American League, 117.6 WAR. Then you have Ted Williams, number 14. I was kind of surprised at that. But then you realize he only, quote unquote, only played 19 years. He basically lost about 4.5, I'd even say 5 years to military service. Eddie Collins, who was like Henderson and only in Philadelphia, played 25 years just like Henderson. I was amazed at this. He's 124.3 on the WAR. Rogers Hornsby, 127, played 23 years. Stan the Man, 128.5. That's Stan Musial, 22 years. It's amazing. 22 years, 3,630 hits total. And I think he hit just as many at home, which would be 18-15, as on the road. Kind of wild with Stan the Man. Hannes Wagner, 21 years, 131 WAR. Tris Speaker, 22 years, 134.9. Hank Aaron, 143.1. Ty Cobb, 151.5, played 24 years. Willie Mays, 23 years, and he is number 5 all-time at 156.2. Barry Bonds at 162.8 with 22 seasons in baseball is just ahead of fellow Giant Willie Mays. And then you have 2 pitchers, Cy Young, Walter Johnson. And then number 1 all-time is Babe Ruth, also at 22 years, 182.6. Interestingly enough, though, with Babe Ruth, many of those years were spent as a pitcher. Remember, he almost won 100 games. I think it's 95 or 96 games that he won. Maybe it's even 98 in his baseball career. And interestingly enough, as I was going through this, I was surprised with kind of Willie Mays being number 5. And I was amazed with Ricky Henderson being really so high. And here's why I say that. I was going over some of the stats with comparing him to Henderson with the other ball players. And here's the wild thing. And it's this. You would think with all his speed, now remember that Henderson led He's the all-time base stealer with 1,406. And with the top 19 players of all time, and it's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Only 13 are, let's say, regular players. The others are pitchers. Henderson is last in triples. I was totally amazed. I mean, the guy who I feel sorry for with the triples is Hank Aaron. He finished with 98. Couldn't he just stay and get those extra two? In fact, with Hank Aaron, here's the other thing that just drove me crazy with his stats. 624 doubles. I wish he had gotten that 625. And the one that stands out the most, he's the all-time leader in RBIs. He's 2297 all-time RBI leader. I just wish he got those extra three just to make it, even across the boards. But I was really taken aback by the fact that Henderson, playing 25 years, and this has really gone back to baseball strategy and the metrics. And a lot of this I blame on the metrics, or you can attribute to the metrics. Maybe I shouldn't say blame on the metrics, because after all, the metrics, and I am going to defend it, it is trying to make the game better from a strategy and playing standpoint. Now, that doesn't mean all the time it's going to be the most exciting way to play the game, but it, based on statistical information, the data that they have, triples are slowly becoming a thing of the past, because the metrics are telling you it's not worth risking trying to take an extra base, stretching a double into a triple, when you have they have the percentages broken down of what your it doesn't really, in terms of situation, it doesn't really improve your chances being at third base from scoring in comparison to taking the risk of trying to get the third. I think I said that right. But basically it's this. You don't run to third with no outs. You don't run to third with 2 outs. Why? Because it does definitely have an effect, if you just stay on second, of your chances of scoring that run. Even though you have a greater chance, you would think, of being closer to home plate or scoring more runs by being closer to the plate. Statistically, it's saying that it's too big a risk. And that's the shame of it, because without a doubt, the triple, and Ricky only hit 66, it's probably the most exciting play in the game. Yes, I know, home runs being launched all over the place and going out and all the rest of it, but there's nothing more thrilling than watching that guy at bat drill a ball into the gaps. More than likely, it's usually a gap or down the line, bounces off the wall. Maybe it, quote unquote, is misplayed by the outfielder. And I think that's one of the most overrated things, quote unquote, misplaying. You're out there, and this is the beauty, and this is what it does separate great fielders from good fielders and gold glovers from great fielders. And that is just an instinctual ability to read the angles of balls bouncing off the walls or balls glancing off foul pole, whatever. And I think it's kind of unfair to say that you misplayed a ball when a baseball, because it's not perfectly round, and of course there is abnormalities because of the stitching and all the rest of it, it can change its course just with a bounce or a blade of grass or just a patch of dirt and all the rest of it. And you as the outfielder are expected to read all that. Now, the great players, obviously, or the gold glove players, obviously are better at it, I would say, than others. But I don't think that's misplaying as much as one guy just being so much better at doing a skill. It's like playing a piano. The master piano players, the concert players, yes, I think they come in with practice, but it's also just deeply embedded instinct and talent on their part. Anyway, I'm just amazed that of the great players of all time, of which Henderson is one. I mean, he played a quarter of a century. Think about that. Only on this list, only Ricky Henderson and Eddie Collins played 25 years in baseball. That's incredible. And yes, you can say, well, he only played parts and stuff. Still suited up in 25 separate seasons. And here is Henderson with only 66 triples in his career. And the strange thing is, did hit quite a few doubles, although his 5'10 is only ahead of Babe Ruth with 5'06, strangely enough. Eddie Collins with 4'38. That's it. And you would think a guy that lightning fast. And then you start to say to yourself, and this is awful to say. I'm not accusing him of anything. But you wonder if Ricky kind of settled for base hits, knowing he could steal second and or third much easier than trying to leg out a double or trying to turn that double into a triple. Really is interesting. And, for the most part, he was only nailed 335 times. That's an out. He was successful on the base paths 1,406 times. But that 335 outs, it's basically 111 innings, 111.2 innings. It's the equivalent of about 6 ball games or whatever. And that he was nailed at second base or third base or whatever. And my whole point is this. I just wonder if Ricky's pursuit of the stolen base kind of deterred him from, really improving his offensive production at bat. That is, getting the triples and taking the doubles when he could. Had great power, 297. It's ahead of four other great players that include Eddie Collins with 47 lifetime home runs, Honus Wagner with 101. It's kind of surprised at that. But, Wagner had a number of years where he had 9, 10 home runs and still drove in over 100. And you got to remember, it's the dead ball era. 117 for both Speaker and Ty Cobb, both contemporaries. And then you have Ricky Henderson with 297. And then it goes 301 for Rogers Hornsby. Great player himself, a second baseman, whatever. Henderson, though, ready for this, drew 2,190 walks, which was phenomenal. The only other guys with 2,000 walks lifetime are Babe Ruth, 2062. Barry Bonds, the all-time leader, 2558. Ted Williams with 2021. It's amazing. Ted Williams was criticized for taking walks. And his belief was, if I hit that ball that's borderline pitch, the next time it's going to be a strike. And you could understand that. You could. Now, the argument for Williams was that I don't think any teammate was going to be as lethal with the bat as Ted Williams. And they were like, just hit the ball. We need the run. He's at third base. The guy behind you is not going to have the same percentage or the same chance of knocking in a run like you, Ted. We're imploring you to put the bat on the ball. And maybe they were right. Maybe he should have selfishly hit more and not taken as many pitches. Still had 2,654 hits. Would have probably had 3,000 hits had he not lost the 5 years to the military. And I'm not using that as an excuse. That's just a fact. That was in the prime of his career. And Williams lost a number of years to both World War II and then Korea, and still came back and fashioned a career after Korea. Played another 7 years or 6 years. And then you have Henderson with 3,000 hits. Of the top 19 ball players, you have A-Rod. I tell you, I knew A-Rod was a great player. And look, I'm just basing this on statistics and all the rest of it. A-Rod was simply a great player. But sometimes when you start looking into this and delving into the research and the numbers, some of these guys just, even though you're not surprised, sometimes you're just blown out of the water about really how great they were. A-Rod came within 4 home runs of hitting 700 home runs. Yet, he had only 31 triples. Okay, so you have Henderson with 66, A-Rod with only 31. Different players, though. And I think, though, I will tell you this. Actually, A-Rod and Henderson prove my points. That the age of the triple, dead ball era, it was emphasized. Probably in the 50s, what was not emphasized was stealing bases. So now the triple becomes part of the action. And now you have today where walks and not taking any risks on the base paths in terms of maybe stealing a base or stretching a double into the triple has been taken into play. And now you see fewer triples. And of course, here's A-Rod, his contemporary, having the fewest of the all-time greats. And A-Rod played 22 years. After Henderson, you have 71 by Ted Williams. Now, Ted Williams was not the fastest or fleetest of foot. He only had 24 steals in his lifetime and was thrown out 17 on the base paths. So obviously not a high percentage for Ted Williams stealing bases. So he had 71 triples. But again, you're talking about a slugger as opposed to a leadoff hitter for the most part in his career. And then Barry Bonds had 77, another contemporary, like I said. And he was more like this. You could actually argue this, at least in his career with the Giants. It was either a home run, intentional walk. Home run or an intentional walk. Now, I will tell you this. Ruth, I was amazed at this, 136 lifetime triples. Lifetime with Ted Williams. Unbelievable. Lifetime. Barry Bonds, like I said, 77. Here's Ty Cobb, the most of the top. Ready for this? He had 724 doubles, and he had 295 triples. That is incredible. Over 1,000 extra base hits without hitting a home run. And he had 117 for his career. Then you have Honus Wagner, 643 doubles, 252 triples. Another guy, close to 900 extra base hits without hitting a home run. And of course, the all-time leader in doubles, he does make the top 20 list all-time players. Of course, is Tris Speaker, 700. Oh, okay, I'll give you Tris Speaker. I wish he hung around to get 800. That's really a good question. I'm just looking at the contemporaries for doubles. So you have Ricky Henderson, 5'10". When I say contemporaries, I'm talking about the last 20 years. Guys who I saw. And you have Bonds with 601 doubles. All right, that's pretty decent. I'm just saying it's awesome, but you know what I'm saying. It's pretty decent. Then you have A-Rod with 548. And I'm starting to think, are we now to get to 792 is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. All right, because most of the guys are within the realm of about 450 to 500. The only other guy, the guys over 600 are Bonds 601. I said Cobb and Speaker 724 and 792, and then you have Honus Wagner at 643. Those are the only guys over 600 lifetime. So most of the big players have about 500. Now, here's my question. Will we ever see a guy hit 700 doubles again? You're talking about Tris Speaker, 792, way back early part of the 20th century. We've gone over 100 years, and no one's approached that. And the only reason I say that is look at where Ruth is. When he retired, 714 home runs. The only player over 700. The only player over 600. And now look at all the players that we have over 600 home runs. And most of those have occurred in the last 50 to 60 years of baseball. So you start to think, and listen, these are kind of questions that I do with the research kind of hits you. And I'm saying 792. And then you say to yourself, is there anyone close to him? And there really isn't. And now you start to think, will anyone ever approach Tris Speaker's 792? Okay? Heck, will any player today ever get close to 100 triples in their career? I know Aaron, as I said, stopped at 98 or retired with 98. But Mays, his contemporary, had 141 triples. Mays, ready for this? And I know I love talking about Mays. He's just unbelievable. Mays had 3, 4, 5 years early in his career, of course, where he had double digits in triples. And he had 1957 where he had 20, obviously to lead the league, 20 triples. And so you start to say, are the extra base hits like that a thing of the past? Not a thing of the past, but are they slowly being reduced by this wiffle ball mentality? Walk, home run, strikeout. Walk, home run, strikeout. It's really something to think about. With, these players, I just was having a thought about this. With the number of doubles and triples going down over the time, as I said, you wonder if it's ever going to rise again. And of course, you can say, well, baseball is cyclical, and there'll be some manager who will start to see, maybe with his own studies or maybe with the players that he has on his roster, that it's better for him to start stretching the singles into doubles and doubles into triples and all the rest of it. But I'm just taking these guys, at their numbers. Now, RBIs, since Henderson was a leadoff hitter, he is way below all the others. In fact, he only had 1,115 RBIs, which comes out to about 55 to 60 RBIs a year that he averaged. He had 2,295 runs. Ready for this? That does give him 2,295. It puts him in the top echelon, but I think, I'm just trying to put this up here. Aaron had 2,174. Ricky had 2,295. I think that may be the all-time. Let me just see. Yes, Ricky is the all-time leader in runs with 2,295. And again, I'm just having a little brain lock there because I thought maybe I didn't want to say he was the all-time leader because I'm thinking maybe somebody else like a Rose or something. That aggravates me too because I wish he hung around for another 5 runs and get 23. But Ricky is ahead of probably second place or any other player had 2,200 runs lifetime. Barry Bonds, 2,227. Ty Cobb, 2,245. And then it goes down to the next guy is Ruth. This is silence it's just unbelievable what Ruth did in the game of baseball. 2,174 runs he scored. Just amazing. And ready for this? Almost he scored as many runs as he drove in. 2,174 runs scored, 2,214 RBIs. And you got to remember this. 1, he played in the dead ball era. 2, he was pitching and didn't play every day. So I'm not saying he got robbed of the same way that Ted Williams, but imagine had he played, every day for those 5 years, maybe didn't pitch and just, instead played ball, what his stats might have been. It's just incredible. And Ruth has 500, amazing, he has 136 triples. Now, why do I say this? Well, Ruth wasn't the best base stealer. In fact, he ended the 1926 World Series by being picked off with Lou Gehrig at bat. He had 123 steals. He had 116 times in which he was picked off or thrown out. at either second or third base, right? Just barely above 50% as a base stealer. And I will agree with probably the baseball metrics today. They obviously have done a study and really located the percentage. If you're about 70 to a 75%, and I think it's more on 75%, you are seen as a base stealer that is not only capable, but is doing the right things for your ball club in terms of generating or producing runs for your club. All right. And obviously, Ruth at 50%, if I was the manager, I'd be saying, babe, just stick to hitting the ball either out of the ballpark or to the gaps. Don't worry. When you get on base, just get on base and stay there. Don't leave unless the ball is batted. So there's Ruth with 714. Of course, Bonds is 762. All-time leader in walks with 2558. Where is Henderson? He is second with 2190 of the top. I'm just going to say it this way: of the top 19 all-time players, okay? And of the top 16 or 13 of the all-time top players. That's excluding the pitchers, all right? So he had 2,190, which he stayed again to get those extra 10 walks. It would have been great to have him with 2,200 walks all time. And, of course, 297. How did I forget? I wish he had the 3 more home runs. And then I was just looking at this. This is really my last thing. I don't care what anyone says. I know on-base percentage is important. And I know, and I can prove it right now. And really, this is a great point of contention, and really where I started this whole thing and why I'm going to really emphasize this in the last few minutes of the show. And I have said this before, and now I kind of have some proof to back me up with this. But if you think a guy hitting 160 or 200 but draws 100 walks is as valuable as a player that hits 250 but draws 50 walks, I really mean you're kind of crazy. And why I say that is this, and I've maintained this. In order to have a really good on-base percentage, you have to have a decent batting average. It really is pretty simple because it is pretty tough to draw walks. How do I know that? Well, if you were able to draw a walk a game, you'd have 162. Well, the only guy who was ever able to really do that and do it on a consistent basis was really Barry Bonds in our generation, in our lifetime. And that was majority of the time he was being walked, either around or intentionally walked. So he was drawing 200 walks a year. All right? But here's what Henderson, of the top players, okay? And I'm going to go back to Aaron here on this too. Aaron, you know what it is? I kind of deleted Aaron, so I apologize. Aaron hit 305 and had a 374 on-base percentage. So I just want to get that down. He hit 305, had a 374 on-base percentage. Now, you can say I'm looking for a loophole here. Aaron is not the same kind of hitter as Ricky Henderson, but hear me out. Henderson had the lowest batting average of any of the great players. He had 279. His on-base percentage was 401. Okay? His on-base percentage was only 401. Meantime, you have Ruth, 342. 60 points higher, 474 on-base percentage. You have Bonds, 298, 444. 19 points higher. You have Ty Cobb, 366, 433 on-base percentage. All right, he's 87 points higher batting average. He's 32 points higher with the on-base percentage. You have Speaker, 345, 428. I know, only 27 points higher, but nonetheless higher than Ricky Henderson. And in fact, ready for this? All right. His on base percentage, Wagner only drew 963 bases, 1,227 walks fewer than Ricky Henderson. All right. Speaker, 1,381. Okay. His on base percentage, 345, his batting average, 345, 428. Wagner drew 1,200 fewer walks and yet had a just slightly, only 10 points below Henderson's on-base percentage. Then you have Musial, who drew 1,599. There it goes again. I thought for sure he'd have 1,600 walks. Hit 331 lifetime, had a 417 batting average, 16-point higher. And again, you're talking about primarily a home run, well, a power hitter or third, fourth guy in the lineup as opposed to a leadoff hitter, right? Here's Hornsby, who hit 358, had 1,150 fewer walks than Henderson, 434 on base percentage. You had Eddie Collins, not a contemporary, but a former A, 1,499 walks. He had a 333 batting average, 424 on base percentage. He had 600 fewer walks. And then just to move it down, here's Ted Williams. He had 169 fewer walks than Henderson. His batting average was 344, over 60 points higher. His on-base percentage, 482. And he drew 169 fewer walks, 482. And yet, he only had 2,654 hits to Henderson's 3,055, about 300 more hits. And then Gehrig, 340 batting average, drew 680 fewer walks than Henderson, had a 447 on-base percentage. My whole point is this. I don't care what the metrics tell you. A guy is not going to last unless he hits for a decent batting average. He's not. And he can walk. He's going to have to walk 300 times a year. He's never going to have a on-base percentage like these great players. I know, they're immortals. But I'm even looking at this. Even if you're saying, hey, I want a guy, they're not even approaching a 380 or a 370 on-base percentage, hitting at 200 or 210. In short, you got to hit. And I do believe, and maybe this is what Henderson, maybe this is what I'm hoping for. Maybe bringing this up or bringing this to mind, at least with one fan, and starting to realize if you got to hit, other things are going to transpire in the game. More doubles, more exciting plays at third base. Yeah, maybe a cut down in home runs, but maybe also a cut down in strikeouts. In short, maybe an elimination of wiffle ball at the major league level and bringing back baseball to the MLB. Right? Last thing I want to do, and I found this interesting. So I added the hits and the walks together and subtracted the runs to just see what the gap was between being on base and scoring runs. So I took the difference. And it is interesting that the one with the smallest gap, right, of adding walks to hits and subtracting runs was Lou Gehrig, 2,341 run difference between runs and being on base via a walk or a hit. Here's what I get, okay? And I don't know what it tells me. I just thought it was interesting, but I'm starting to think maybe it will tell me even more after I'm just giving a hypothesis about this or a theory about it. Here's what Gehrig did. 1,508 walks, 2,721 hits, and added those together and then subtracted his 1,888 runs lifetime to come up with a gap between being on base and scoring of 2,341. Now, second on that list, as I do this real quick, is Eddie Collins, 2389. Third on the list was Hannes Wagner at 2644. Now, interestingly enough, you got to remember that he drew the fewest walks of any of the great players of all time. Only 963. Didn't even get to 1,000 walks. Kind of interesting. Number 4 on the list, of course, is Willie Mays, 2693. Number 5 is none other than Babe Ruth, 2761. And then my last guy, here he comes. Rickey Henderson is 7th. Now, Rickey had 2,190 walks, 3,055 hits. It gave him a total of 5,190 in terms of being on base safely. Okay, and I'm not talking about hit by pitches and errors and all the rest of it. Just walks and or hits. His difference: he scored 2,295 runs. His difference was 2,895 to place him 7th among the top 19. Now, I guess in theory, what I would like to say, the shortness and gap, let's say, with Gehrig, well, he played on the Murderous Rose team of the great Yankee teams, and then he played with the DiMaggio teams, of the 30s before being forced into retirement. Ruth, of course, he's 2761, played on a great, productive Murderous Row Yankee team. Here's the one I guess that surprised me the most. Probably the biggest gap that I saw belonged to Stan Musial, 3,280. Now, I know this. There were some Cardinal teams that were really bad, probably in the 50s. He did play on some great Cardinal teams in the 40s. And all I can think of is this. Maybe there's such a big gap in Musial between getting on base safely and scoring. Could be his speed. Could be the fact that other players just didn't knock him in, obviously. Or maybe they weren't a good team. So it's just fun things, all right? Henderson played on some great teams, World Series winners. Mays, of course, 2693, played on some good teams with the Giants. And I say good because they had their ups and downs out in San Francisco. That was in a lot of ways, as I leave this, because maybe the difference between Henderson and Mays is the fact that I think the A's during Henderson's years kind of figured it out to at least win one championship and get the 3 World Series. Meanwhile, Mays in the 60s, they had tremendous talent, but could never figure it out, never put the pieces together, you could argue. Yeah, they did win in 62, but Mays and the Giants didn't win the World Series. So maybe this is kind of showing, that gap. Maybe the fact that it kind of indicates, hey, you know what? Maybe this guy's greatness on certain teams was even greater because of the gap, in the number of runs they scored as opposed to the number of times they got on base. I don't know. It's interesting. It's just something I threw in there. Maybe it doesn't tell us anything, but it's just something that I will investigate because some of these guys, obviously, Bonds, I'm just going to tell you this, 3266. Bonds played in 1 World Series, and they lost. And he has one of the highest in terms of gap. And you're starting to think, why is it so high? Guy gets on base, you would expect, especially Bonds, all-time leader in walks, just shy of 3,000 hits. You would expect probably the gap to be a little bit smaller. And yet it's one of the largest of the top players of all time. I don't know. It's just something to have some fun during the hot stove period in baseball, as we're just about 6 to 7 weeks away from spring training. This is Will O'Toole for Park Ridge Sports, reviewing the career of Rickey Henderson from compared to the other greats of the game. Thanks for joining. Be back next week.